In the fall of 1833, a trapper named Ezra Colt rode into the Uinta Mountains with 16 traps, a rifle he'd paid for in beaver plume, and a single wool blanket folded behind his saddle. The nearest trading post sat 400 miles east, and he wasn't due back at it for 11 months. When the first blizzard hit in October, he was warm. When his flint cracked in a January cold snap, he had fire again inside a minute without walking to a store. When his boots split open in March, he didn't need a delivery truck. He needed a deer, and the mountains were full of those. He never carried a stove, a sleeping pad, a water filter, a headlamp, or a single ounce of anything with a barcode on it. And here's the part the history books leave out. By his own account, copied years later into a trapper's journal, that was the most comfortable winter of his life. I'm Amos Walker. Going on 20 years now, I've lived without a power line running to my place, off a piece of ground my own family has worked since before the highway existed. My grandfather kept a leather-bound journal from the 1940s until the winter he passed, and near everything I'm about to walk you through, he copied into those pages by hand and made me promise it wouldn't die with him. This is me keeping that promise. And I'll tell you plainly, most of what kept a man like Ezra Colt alive didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because somebody figured out how to charge you for the thing he used to get free off the land. That's not a conspiracy, friend. That's just how markets eat old skills, one generation at a time, until the grandkids think the plastic version was always the only option. Today, I'm walking you through 15 of those skills, the ones that make the gear closet in your garage look like an expensive joke somebody played on you. Stick with me for number 9, the plant growing by your local creek that's hiding in your aspirin bottle. Number 3, the trick that lets a man carry a lit fire in his coat pocket all day without a single flame touching anything. And number 1, which isn't really a trick at all. It's the reason Ezra Colt never once needed a receipt to make it through a Rocky Mountain winter. Start cheap and start with what's on your back. A Hudson's Bay point blanket, sewn into a hooded coat the trade called a capote, was standard winter issue at fur posts since the 1780s. It's still being cut from the same pattern today. Wool's fibers are crimped, so they trap dead air the way any good insulation does. And here's the number your $600 puffy jacket can't match. A synthetic shell melts the instant a spark jumps out of the fire, leaving a hole the size of a dime. Wool just singes and keeps working. Independent cold weather testers have soaked wool and synthetic side by side and found wet wool doesn't outwarm anything. That myth needs killing right here. But it fails slow while synthetic fails all at once, and it never turns clammy cold against your skin the way wet cotton does. One blanket, your coat by day, your bedroll by night. Next one replaces a $15 spool of paracord with a fistful of roadside weeds. Cotton canvas soaked in linseed oil or rubbed down with wax if you're in a hurry. Sheds rain the way a duck's feathers shed a pond, because that's the exact same trick, borrowed from sailors 2 centuries before. A company trademarked the word Gore-Tex in 1969. It's heavier, and on a hot July afternoon, a modern membrane will breathe better. I won't lie to you about that. But a $300 rain shell delaminates in 5 seasons and goes in the landfill. A waxed canvas coat gets reproofed with a $2 tin of wax and outlives the man who bought it and his son after him. One is a product with a warranty that runs out. The other is a skill with a candle stub. Strip the bark fiber off dogbane or stinging nettle, the 2 strongest cordage plants growing wild in North America. Split it fine and twist 2 strands against each other in what rope makers call a reverse wrap. The twist locks itself tighter the harder you pull instead of unraveling like a shoelace under load. Trappers built bowstrings, fishing line, snare cord, and fish nets straight out of weeds most homeowners spend good money poisoning out of their own yard. It's slower to make than buying a spool off a shelf, and it's weaker strand for strand than nylon. I'll give the manufacturers that much, honestly. But a $15 hank of paracord runs out on day 3 of a long trip, and once it's gone until the next store. A patch of nettles by the fence line is never gone. It grows back every single year, whether you asked it to or not. Next one replaces a $40 box of steel leg-hold traps with 3 sticks and a pocket knife. The figure 4 deadfall is 3 notched sticks, an upright, a diagonal, and a baited trigger that lock together into unstable balance under a rock 3 times the weight of whatever you're after. An animal so much as nudges the trigger stick, the geometry collapses, and gravity does the rest of the work for free. No spring to rust, no cable to snap, no moving metal part at all to lose in the snow. A trapper could whittle a dozen of these from standing deadwood in a single afternoon and set a whole trap line while he slept, instead of hauling a dozen steel traps across a mountain on a pack animal's back. It's genuinely finicky to balance right. That part's true, no sugarcoating it, and you'll knock it over more than once before you get the feel of it. But once it's set, it costs nothing. It never needs a battery, and there's no warranty card to fill out when it breaks, because wood doesn't come with one. Cattails growing at the edge of any clean pond will outperform 4 separate aisles at your outdoor store. The green flower head boils up like corn on the cob in about 15 minutes. The yellow pollen shakes off into a usable flower. The starchy root grinds into more flour still. The dried fluff off last year's seed head catches a spark like the finest tinder you've ever struck, and the long flat leaves braid into cordage or bedding thick enough to sleep on. One plant standing in the mud, doing the job of your food bag, your fire kit, your rope, and your sleeping pad, for free, every single summer. The one honest catch: cattails pull whatever's in the water straight into their roots. So you only harvest from a pond clean enough to drink from yourself. Notice the pattern yet? Every trick so far has replaced something sitting in a checkout aisle. From here to the halfway mark, the gear gets more expensive, and the trick that replaces it gets simpler. When a pine tree dies, resin floods into the stump and into the joints where the limbs met the trunk, and given a few years, that wood turns almost entirely into hardened resin. Old-timers called it fat wood, and it's still lying at your feet in any pine forest that's ever lost a tree. Split a chunk open, shave it into curls with a knife, and it lights from a single spark in the rain, because the resin itself is waterproof and burns like a candle. A bag of chemical fire starter cubes runs $10 and does the job exactly once before it's gone. A single fatwood stump does it 100 times over, sitting there free for anyone willing to bend down and pick it up. Willow bark carries a compound called salicin, and your own liver converts salicin into the very same active chemical family that ends up in a bottle of aspirin. A clergyman named Edward Stone wrote up willow bark curing fevers for the Royal Society clear back in 1763, 134 years before a chemist working for a German dye company synthesized the tablet version and put a brand name on it in 1897. Chew the inner bark or steep it as a tea, and you're taking the same medicine, growing wild by nearly every creek in North America, no prescription, and no $12 price tag. It's not as precisely dosed as a pill, and it carries the same warnings aspirin does, so this isn't a swap for your medicine cabinet. It's proof your medicine cabinet is standing on the shoulders of a tree. Next one replaces a $200 stiff leather jacket with brains you are about to throw in the fire. Brain tanning turns a raw, board-stiff hide into buckskin that breathes like woven fabric and moves like it too, because an animal's brain carries a natural emulsifier that works fat down between the collagen fibers so they slide past each other instead of gluing solid into rawhide. Work the hide constantly while it dries, then finish it over a smoky fire, and you get leather that stays soft even after soaking, dries out, and softens right back up again. There's an old rule passed down among people who still do this by hand. Every animal carries just about enough brain to tan its own hide, with nothing wasted. A modern chrome tan jacket runs $200, doesn't breathe, and cracks with age at the seams. This one gets softer the longer you wear it, for the rest of its life. Heat birch bark slowly, with almost no oxygen in the container, and it sweats out a black sticky tar. Hard as a rock when it's cool, tacky again the second you warm it over a coal. Archaeologists have pulled a spear point out of the ground, with a Neanderthal's 50,000-year-old thumbprint still pressed into the tar that hafted it. And the 5,000-year-old mummy, known as Ötzi, carried a copper axe glued together with this exact same material. It seals a cracked water container, glues an arrowhead onto its shaft, patches a torn seam in a boot, and when the bond finally fails, you don't throw it out. You just warm it back up and press it together again. A tube of superglue does one job, once, and then it's an empty tube in the trash. This glue has been remelting itself since before the pyramids were stacked. Pemmican is dried meat pounded down to a powder and mixed roughly half by weight with rendered fat, pressed into a hard cake you can carry in a saddlebag for months. The dryness starves out the bacteria that spoil meat, and the fat seals the powder away from air and moisture. Two separate preservation systems, stacked, doing the same job your refrigerator does with a compressor and a monthly power bill. Ounce for ounce, it beats nearly anything on a grocery shelf for calories packed into the smallest possible weight, and it needs no water, no cookpot, no plastic wrapper. It fueled the entire fur trade, and decades later, some of the first polar expeditions ran on the same recipe. A $9 energy bar gives you 200 calories and a foil wrapper for the landfill. A block of pemmican the size of your fist gives you most of a week. From here to the end, we're done talking about gear altogether. From here down, it's the difference between a man who needs a store to survive and a man who doesn't. Drive a straight stick into open ground. Mark the tip of its shadow with a pebble. Wait 20 minutes, and mark the shadow's tip again. The line between those two marks runs east to west every single day for free. No exceptions. No app required. Come nightfall, find the two outer stars in the bowl of the Big Dipper and follow the line they draw, and it points you straight at Polaris, true north to within about a single degree, same as it did for every wagon train that ever crossed this country. And forget the old line about moss growing on the north side of a tree. Moss grows wherever it's damp and shaded, nothing more. And that one myth alone has turned around more lost hikers than it's ever helped. A GPS unit is a battery that dies in the cold within the hour, loses its signal under a thick canopy, and can be jammed by anybody with the right equipment. The sun and the stars have never once needed to be recharged, and nobody's found a way to patent either of them yet. Slice meat thin, hang it over a fire kept low and cool, not hot enough to cook it, just smoky enough to dry it. And the wood itself does the preserving, because the compounds in smoke are naturally hostile to bacteria, combined with the drying that turns a whole animal into food that keeps for months, with zero electricity spent anywhere in the process. Whole winters were fed this way, across plains and mountains alike, strips hanging over a pit fire that never once needed to be plugged into a wall, in a smokehouse built from nothing but poles and hide. A chest freezer runs you $1,500 and turns into a rotting, dripping mess the first time a storm knocks the power out for a week. This only ever needed a fire, some patience, and meat you'd already earned, last stretch before the finish. This next one is the trick my own granddad devoted 3 full pages of his journal to, and I still lean on it every winter without fail. Flint struck hard against hardened steel throws a spark hot enough to catch on char cloth. Plain cotton, scorched black inside a sealed tin until it's nearly pure carbon, so it grabs the faintest spark and holds a slow, patient ember instead of bursting into flame. Pair that ember with amadou, a felted material worked out of a shelf fungus that grows on old birch and beech trees, and you can carry a live coal quietly smoldering, tucked in a pocket for hours, moving fire from one camp to the next without ever striking a second match. The same 5,000-year-old Iceman who carried the birch tar glue also carried processed amadou in his kit, which means this exact fire-carrying trick predates written language itself. A butane lighter is faster, I'll grant you that outright. But a lighter runs dry, and it barely sparks once the temperature drops near freezing, and there's no tree on earth that refills it for you. Flint, steel, charcloth, and amadou have no charge to run out of. The striker lasts a working man's whole lifetime, and the tinder remakes itself from any cotton rag and any old fungus off any old log in the woods. A bow made from nothing more than a bent green branch and a length of cord spins a wooden spindle against a fireboard fast enough that friction alone turns the wood dust into a live ember. No flint, no steel, no fuel of any kind, just 2 sticks and a bootlace. It's genuinely difficult to get right, and it fails far more than it succeeds the first dozen times a man tries it, and I won't pretend otherwise. But that difficulty is exactly the point of showing it to you. This isn't the easy way to make fire. It's proof that fire is a skill a man owns outright, not a product he can lose, forget to pack, or leave sitting on a gas station counter 300 miles behind him. Number 1 isn't a trick at all, friend. It's the thing every other one of these 14 was quietly pointing toward the whole time. An A-frame shelter, built over a single ridgepole and packed 3 feet deep in dry leaves on every side, traps still air the exact same way a sleeping bag does. Except this insulation is free. It's lying all over the forest floor. And when it gets wet, you don't throw it in the trash. You just pull 3 more feet of it off the ground. Build it small, just big enough for your own body, so your own heat is doing all the warming. No zipper to jam, no R value printed on a tag from a factory overseas. Nothing between you and the ground but what you gathered with your own 2 hands. That's what Ezra Colt actually had, out there in the Uintas through the winter of 1833. Not a warehouse of gear, a handful of skills that never once depended on a supply chain reaching him 400 miles into the mountains. He wasn't poor, friend. He'd simply subtracted the middleman from his own survival. And every single trick on this list, the wool, the tar, the pemmican, the fire riding quiet in his coat pocket, the leaves piled over his head, was one more piece of that same one skill. The skill of not needing a truck to bring it, a factory to make it, a bill to keep it running, or a stranger's permission to have it. Now, I'm not standing here telling you to walk into the mountains tomorrow with nothing but a belt knife. I'm telling you plainly that your great-grandparents didn't lose these skills on their own. They were sold something shinier and told the old way was quaint, backward, something to be embarrassed about. That's not a conspiracy either, friend. That's just good marketing on somebody else's part and forgetting on ours, generation after generation, until nobody remembered there was ever a choice to make. So don't go try all 15 of these by Sunday. Pick one, split open a chunk of fat wood on your next trip out, and watch it catch fire in the rain when nothing else in your pack will. Steep yourself a cup of willow bark tea and taste exactly what your medicine cabinet is standing on the shoulders of. Carve one figure 4 trap in the backyard just to watch 3 sticks and a rock. Do something that looks like magic right up until the moment you understand it. And then it's just carpentry. One thing this week. That's the whole method. That's how a dead skill climbs back up out of the ground and into a pair of living hands. Tell me down in the comments which one of these 15 your own grandfather or grandmother actually did with their own 2 hands. Not read about in a book, actually did. Whichever one shows up the most down there is the one I build a full episode around next. This isn't a lifestyle channel, friend. It's a library that somebody was hoping you'd never open back up, and every dusty page in it still works exactly as well today as it did the day it was written down. Every single subscriber is one more set of hands holding that door open for the next person who comes looking. And next time out, I'm going after the 2-cent trick that lit half the frontier's homes after the sun went down, and the industry that made sure you'd never hear about it twice. I'll see you out there. Keep the